The idea is that every now and again we might actually drop it, and that represents trauma. And if we have cracked our phone, or if we've dropped our phone, um, it might just not be working, and because the impact was so great, it's just not functioning, and so we sometimes don't know what to do. We try and reload the programs; they're just not. But there's a simple little trick: just press and hold down the on-off button for 5 seconds, and the entire system reboots. And that's what gratitude does. In the midst of your worst storm, where things are not going your way, you just need to stop for 2 seconds and go, all right, I can't control what's happening to me right now, but I can control what happens in me. And so let me just find 5 things to be grateful for in this moment. As you know, ancient scriptures and proverbs and writings and teachings say, be grateful in all things, not some things, not most things, but in all things. And sometimes we know that doesn't make sense, because how can I be grateful when this has happened to me, and that person's betrayed me in this situation, and that government, or that, or stop. There's always something that we can be thankful for, and when we have the discipline to stop in the midst of the storm, well, we actually recognize that whatever we go through, we can grow through. And I love that storms, when you look at the research about the rain from a lightning or a thunderstorm, plants grow better from the rain of a storm than they do from normal rain shower or from a sprinkler system. And the reason why, I don't know if you knew that, but the reason why is because when the lightning strikes, it separates the nitrons in the air, which fall to the earth together with the raindrops. And when they hit the ground and become infused with the dirt, the nitrons turn into nitrate, which is fertilizer and helps the plants grow. And so I can be grateful even in the darkest of days. And the interesting thing is, grateful people tend to attract more good things into their life to be more grateful for. We've got a part of our brain called the RAS, R-A-S, the reticular activating system. And you might have heard about this before, or you might recognize this system at play when you buy a new car. It's probably the most commonly used example. And so you never saw that car around on the streets before, but now that you have one, you see them everywhere. And that's pretty much what our brain does by default. So when something goes wrong for us, sometimes it's just so easy for us to wallow in our pain, to nurse, curse, and rehearse all of the bad things. So it's like sitting on the couch eating potato chips. It's just so easy to eat potato chips. But we know the consequence of that will be it just awakens my hunger to want more potato chips. And so what else have I got in the fridge? And I'll go in search of food, and there's a consequence for that. But when I stop and I have the discipline to be grateful, what I'm actually doing is I'm cutting off the capacity for bitterness. So think of bitterness as a little bit like a root that grows from a seed of offense. And so if a seed of offense starts growing roots of bitterness in my life, well, it's going to bear fruit in my life. And the book of Hebrews actually says that this is one of the rare few things that can actually disqualify you from the grace of God. I mean, that's pretty serious stuff. So if you have or allow a root of bitterness to grow up in your life, what it does is it defiles you. And in the Old Testament, to be defiled was to be unclean, ceremonially unclean. You couldn't get access to the temple. So if you're defiled, your access to God is limited. So you might think, well, I heard from God. No, you can't hear anything, because you've got a root of bitterness and you've been cut off. So what do we do? Well, I have to have the discipline to put that offense to the side. I'm not going to nurse, curse, and rehearse it. Rather, I'm going to immerse it in gratitude, and that will enable me to reverse it and then ultimately disperse it from my life. This is the discipline that I need to engage in these difficult, dark moments. Just 5 things. It sounds simple, but it's not. Try do it yourself when you're in the midst of a storm. You'll probably get to 3 things. Well, I'm thankful that I'm still alive, thankful that it's a sunny day, and you'll get a third thing. And then 4 and 5 is really hard, but that's when you need to push through. It's like doing those bench presses. When you're right at the very end, that's where the growth takes place. Only start counting when it starts to hurt. There's great research that's been conducted by, I think it was Michigan State University, where they looked at the different ways in which we can be grateful, and not all ways are equal. So you can go and express your gratitude to a person and say, thank you so much for what you've done in my life, the impact that you had, and you can communicate your appreciation for them, edify them, lift them up, and research shows that activity makes you feel great. It's a really good thing, but it's a transient feeling. So, in other words, it's not long lasting. You'll feel great today, but tomorrow you'll be right back to where you started. It was a nice activity, gave you a momentary kick. But if you engage the daily discipline of gratitude, where you're not thanking a person, but rather you're thanking the source of good things in your life, because good things don't just come from nowhere, there's a source for them. And so when you tap into the source and you can list every evening before going to bed, what are the 5 things that transpired today? And we're not talking about generic things, we're talking about specific things that transpired where you could see the fingerprints of God on your life, or the how a situation was going that way, but then it was turned around. And what can I actually be thankful for? And so that process is called meditation. I'm meditating on the things that are right and pure and good and just. And when I do these things, there's a promise attached to it that there's this peace that surpasses all understanding that guards my heart and my mind. So, this daily discipline, research shows, doesn't produce the same emotional effects of, oh wow, I feel fantastic in the moment. In fact, it takes a number of weeks in order for that emotional well being to rise. But what research shows is that once you have established a neural pathway, in other words, a habitual pattern of behavior, every night, this is my routine, this is what I do, after a couple of weeks, that emotional well being is now sustainable for the long term.